Here it is, folks. There's horror, and then there's horror that takes things to a whole nother level. That's what Brandon Cronenberg has done. This is only his third movie, and he's captured what made his father's films so compelling, and arguably, he's surpassed it. Here's my pick for the #1 horror movie since last Halloween, Infinity Pool. This is ML Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2022 through 2023. Counting down the best in horror within the window of October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. Before I dive into my #1 pick of the best in horror countdown, I wanted to raise a glass and extend my heartfelt gratitude for everyone who has subscribed, followed, and commented on this countdown all month long. It truly is the highlight of my year to bring these picks to you all, and I'm already starting next year's list. But while I have your collective ear holes, I also wanted to give you an update on my various other projects on the horizon. I know my first film, Shark Waters, left a lot to be desired. It was a first stab at a screenplay and a very, very, very low-budget movie. But it opened the doors for me to have 2 other films coming up over the next year. One will be out in early 2024, and the other, which I am currently working on, will be released later in the year. I hope to provide updates when I'm allowed to. On the comics front, I plan not only to do a few videos charting my own history and current turbulent journey in writing comic books in the current market, but I also will be doing a Kickstarter or 2 over the course of the next year, so be on the lookout for some new horror comics by me in the near future. If you like my views on horror, I hope you'll be interested in these horror projects. But worry not, ML Miller Frights isn't going anywhere. I may morph the channel into some more countdowns or lists as they seem to be popular, but I'll still be commenting on all things horror as long as the powers that be allow me. Anyway, once again, thanks so much for paying attention to this channel. Cheers, and on with the countdown. #1. Infinity Pool was released on January 27th, 2023. It's streaming on Hulu and Paramount Plus from Neon Pictures. It's directed and written by Brandon Cronenberg. Man, Brandon Cronenberg is something else. In a few films, the man has become one of my favorite directors. With his 2 earlier films, Antiviral and Possessor, he's proven to make unique films with truly original concepts that twist reality as we know it and turn modern issues into enlightening stories. And of course, there's the body horror. A subject of horror often misinterpreted, but perfected by Cronenberg's father, David. But unlike much of David's recent work, which feels more suitable for the niche and art house crowd, Brandon's work feels like he wants to communicate to the masses. Now that doesn't mean Brandon's gone Hollywood, but Infinity Pool is on a whole new and twisted level, yet feels much more accessible than both of his other films to date. Looking for inspiration for his new book, writer James, played by Alexander Skarsgård, and his wife, M, played by Cleopatra Coleman, take a much-needed vacation to the fictional island of Litolka. This is where they meet an eccentric couple, Alban, played by Jaleel Lespert, and his wife Gabby, played by Mia Goth, who seem to know James from his first book and invite them to a secluded beach outside of the resort boundary. After partying all day on the beach, James drives the crew home and accidentally kills a civilian crossing the road. Doing the right thing, James turns himself in to the local police, but he doesn't understand that in Litolka, any crime resulting in death is punishable by execution. But for a large amount of money, the government can replace James with a lab-grown doppelganger to stand in for the execution. Once he witnesses the death of this double, it opens something dark in James, a darkness that is shared by the rest of the rich and the elite who vacation at the foreign island. Like his father's films before him, Brandon Cronenberg delivers another puzzle of a movie that proves to be fascinating to unfurl. It's a film that can inspire all sorts of questions about morality, the ugly tourist, the privileged, and the basic human experience. On the fictional island of Litolka, It seems you can get away with any crime, and that is why only the elite are attracted to it. Seeing these so-called upper-class elites revert back and forth into their roles they have back home is the most horrific moment of the movie. It doesn't involve blood or guts or any kind of torture, but it shows how easily they can forget the horrors they inflict on others and just go on being mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, whatever. These people still possess the memories of all they've done on the island. They just don't care because it doesn't affect them in the long run. Their money can sweep it under the rug. Of course, it's their money that separates them from the rest of the world, and I guess this is Cronenberg's way of talking about how souls are often exchanged for residency in the upper crust. James, Skarsgård, wants this desperately. He's pursuing inspiration, not seemingly because he has an urge to create, but it's revealed that it's because by writing a new book, that would lead him to fame and fortune.
This country, you gotta make the money first. Then when you get the money, you get the power. Then when you get the power, then you get the woman.
James is easily manipulated by those around him because they recognize his book, even though it's been deemed a critical and financial failure, as he is a relation to the publisher, and only got his chance to write it because of nepotism, not talent. He wants to prove otherwise. But as seen when he is given a chance to live like the rich, that is what he really wants. The hurdles James leaps in order to convince himself to stay on the island increase the deeper he descends into the sins the group commit. These acts are beyond horrifying, harkening back to Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Yep, that's right, folks. It's that dark and twisted. Downright primal. What I love about Cronenberg's work is that it invites conversation. It purposefully leaves details out and challenges the viewer to fill them in with their own dark details. Is this process of making a new human being technology or some kind of supernatural ritual? Are the doppelgangers murdered in the place of the rich? Or are the rich punished, and are the residents of the island replacing the elite with their own creations destined to return and pay scads more money to kill and be killed again? Why does James end up where he is by the end of the film? It's all up for debate and discussion, and every thread can be explored with fascinating details and reason. You just don't get that in many horror films today. And while one might not consider Infinity Pool a typical horror film, it is the most terrifying of horrors as it raises questions we are not comfortable answering. Reminiscent of last year's excellent Speak No Evil, which is being remade in English starring James McAvoy soon, I hope that's good, it places the viewer right on the back of an unreliable and wholly unlikable lead. James is weak. He's shallow. He's easily manipulated. These are not qualities we're comfortable with. Even though Skarsgård is basically the ideal handsome leading man, he's anything but here in this movie. And Cronenberg's immersive story forces us to slip into his very undesirable persona. That's the true terror of Infinity Pool, and it's one that many will not be prepared to experience. Of course, I have to talk about Mia Goth, who has become a powerful force in horror in the last year. Sure, she was wonderful in Pearl, Oscar-worthy in my opinion, but she's given one hell of a meaty role to play in Infinity Pool. From doe-eyed seductress to rabid psychopath, she is in control every step of the way and knows exactly what she's doing, making her all the more deadly. This role could propel Goth into the stratosphere, just the way she screams, "Yeah! Jamesy!" is enough to give you chills and nightmares. During the final scenes, where she simply participates in small talk about her boring life back home, is a transformation that is seemingly banal, but a wonderfully wicked and subtle metamorphosis after the debaucherous things we've seen her do throughout the film. Cleopatra Coleman has the arduous task of keeping up with Goth. She does her part capably, but is probably the most underdeveloped of the bunch, and is kind of reduced to be the symbolic, virtuous person that the rest have ventured so far, far away from due to their heinous actions. Things get trippy as hell, and it reminds me of another Brandon Cronenberg film, Possessor, in regards to the process of leaving one mindscape and entering another. It seems the Lee Tolkiens are using similar technology or spells or whatever it is. It involves entrancing lights, bizarre imagery, and the shredding of everything we know that is real. Infinity Pool is not about the bizarre process of replication or the psychedelic drug-infused sex scenes. It's about the shredding of humanity. It's about going someplace and believing that you are so much better than the people there that you feel you can do anything, no matter how much it hurts others. It's about the ugly tourist who feels like responsibility is so far away and they get to live out every horrible urge and impulse that they would never even think of doing back home. It's about hypocrisy. It's about wanting something so bad that you'd do anything for it, even losing yourself and all you hold dear in order to achieve it. All of those are not your typical topics of horror, but it is enmeshed into the fabric of Infinity Pool. Cronenberg seems to have surpassed his visionary father in the vast avenues of the bizarre, and I cannot wait to see where he takes us next. Cronenberg has a beautiful eye, making the ugliest scenes into beauty and making the most mundane seem so unusual. While I really liked David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future, I felt it was so obtuse that it left out almost too much for the viewer to actually put the story together. Brandon tells a story with just as much left unsaid, but is able to put it in a much sleeker, sexier, and more mass-friendly package without spoon-feeding the intended message. It reminded me of his father's earlier, more mainstream work that he is best known and loved for. I hate having to compare father and son, but wow, there must be something in the water at the Cronenberg house that births this kind of genius. Infinity Pool is Brandon Cronenberg's best film to date. It's violent and sexy, it's perverse and introspective. There's a whole lot of movie to enjoy in this one. But don't feel intimidated. Dive into the Infinity Pool. The water's one of a kind. Speaking of compelling subject matter, Franklin Ritch came out of nowhere and blew me away with a riveting sci-fi fable, ARTIFICE Girl. It's not exactly horror, so it didn't show up on the countdown, but without a laser sword or a spaceship, it is the best sci-fi film you're going to experience this year. It's timely, it's relevant, and it's going to make you think. The ARTIFICE Girl was released on April 27th, 2023. It's streaming on Tubi. It's directed and written by Franklin Ritch. AI is all the rage these days, with people deliberating whether it's the next step in human technological evolution or the end of humanity as we know it. Most likely neither of these two extremes will happen, and that's the world where the ARTIFICE Girl resides in. Yes, it depicts an artificial intelligence evolving exponentially to the point where it is beyond human intelligence, but at its core is a very human story about betrayal, trust, and how humanity can be both beautiful and ugly at the same time. The ARTIFICE Girl is segmented into 3 parts, depicting its protagonist, Gareth, played by writer-director Franklin Ritch, at different points in his life. Gareth is flawed to his core, having been the victim of abuse at a very young age and survived it, but never quite getting over it. As a result of this childhood trauma, Gareth has the drive and brains to develop the world's first truly artificial intelligence and gives her the online visage of a young girl named Cherry, played by Tatum Matthews. Cherry's main directive is to seek out online predators and turn them in to the authorities. But as Cherry's intelligence evolves, moral issues begin to surface regarding whether or not Cherry has developed the emotional capacity to give consent to be used in such a way. What spirals from that debate is intelligent, mind-blowing, and absolutely riveting stuff. As the ARTIFICE Girl played on, I could not keep my eyes away from it. It's definitely not the most visually stunning film. This is a film that instead presents complex arguments about AI, its intentions, and what it may evolve into. Yes, it sprouts from icky beginnings involving really bad people seeking out what they think to be a young girl online, but from those murky depths come some downright fascinating debates about what it means to be human. I usually don't go for sci-fi because modern science fiction really seems to miss the point of what it originally was all about. Looking back to early sci-fi works, they envisioned the future of humanity. Some of it good, some of it not so much, but all of it showed humanity before a particular innovation, discovery, encounter, and how that humanity is forever changed afterwards. Somewhere along the line, it became about laser swords, aliens, and spaceships. But for me, true sci-fi challenges us to look past what we have and hypothesize about what we will be, always considering that human element. This is exactly what The Artifice Girl does. It's not there to dazzle us with showy special effects. There really is very little to speak of. But the debate this film raises and poses to the viewer is truly revolutionary stuff that should be heard and seen by anyone who wants to have some kind of halfway intelligent conversation about AI. The Artifice Girl is wonderfully acted from top to bottom. Franklin Ritch is powerful as the creator of Cherry, who is emotionless and more robotic than Cherry herself. While the fast-talking tech guy is somewhat of a cliché, he still manages to show the seething rage underneath all of that repression. Juggling a film of this intellectual heft from the writing and directing standpoint is hard enough, but Ritch also does a great job bringing the complex character to life. But the real heavy lifting goes to Cherry herself, played by Tatum Matthews, who varies her evolution in subtle to dynamic ways, the more she learns and grows from her programming. It's not an easy role, but she plays robotics simulating very human emotions remarkably well. Finally, Lance Henriksen gives the strongest performance he's put forth in years. Playing Gareth later in his life, this genre staple has never been stronger and more sympathetic than what he gives in the latter portion of this film. If there's a weak spot in The Artifice Girl, I'd say it's that I don't know if it completely sticks the landing in the third and final chapter. I feel Franklin Ritch really delivered a cold, claustrophobic, and conflict-laden debates between the factions of the organization behind Cherry, but when the big emotional payoff comes in the climax, I think the film misses by inches. It's close. I think there are some great performances by both Henriksen and Matthews, but still there's that emotional nugget that feels like it just didn't get there. Nevertheless, the final moments are wonderfully realized, leaving the viewer with tons to talk about afterwards. This type of film doesn't come along often enough. It breaks expectations of what one expects to be science fiction and challenges its viewer to think outside of what has been programmed. The Artifice Girl deserves to be put on the mantle with such lo-fi sci-fi like Pi, Moon, and Primer. It's that good. It brings up questions raised in Blade Runner and some of Asimov's work, but does so in bold, intelligent, ground-level, but fresh ways that we haven't seen before. And while I usually cover horror, sometimes I see a genre movie slightly out of the horror realm that deserves recognition. While it deals with very horrifying things, The Artifice Girl shines mainly because it challenges the viewer by dealing with a topic we might not be thinking about right now, but most likely soon will be. I highly recommend this fantastic little movie, and I wish I would have seen it sooner. Well, that's it. Another best of the best countdown in horror has come to an end. But that doesn't mean the spooky stuff has to stop. I review horror movies all year long. I really appreciate those of you who have subscribed and followed me over the last month. Please keep doing so. I'm going to keep on highlighting scares that a lot of other people don't cover. So hopefully you stick around. And maybe tell a friend or two about the channel. As always, I invite you guys to agree, disagree, or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies, especially ones that you always watch for Halloween. Remember to hit all the bells and whistles below, and you'll never miss one of these posts. Let's all keep being spooky all year round. Happy Halloween, folks.